views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Get ready for a game changer. Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sarah will bring you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Now here's your host, Sarah Westall.
Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and you're listening to the Conscious Business Radio Network. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East, and unfortunately, let's face it, we're on the brink of World War III, and what the media isn't telling you is there is a huge exercise going on called Northern Thunder. And the exercise includes 350,000 soldiers, 20,000 tanks, 2,450 warplanes, and 460 military helicopters. And it's supplied by over 20 different countries that are involved in this exercise. From Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. I mean, the list goes on and on. This does not include the United States, but it includes most of our, 20 countries in that area. While that is also going on, Turkey has been bombing Syria. They've been doing that since the beginning of February, and they've been urging the United States to mount a ground operation in Syria. They're trying to get their NATO allies to come together and do that. At the same time, Russia is warning everyone that an escalation such as this will cause World War III to explode in the region, which is a very scary thought. Some people believe, because they're trying to negotiate an agreement of peace, some people believe that this is really just all posturing on the side of NATO and the United States to force Russia to negotiate a deal. So Russia is going to, some people think they're just going to call them their bluff and not do anything and see what happens. The scary part is it's a pretty dangerous chicken and egg scenario, and to see what's going on. Well, this episode, I'm bringing Bruce Gagnon to the program, and it was initially intended to talk about militarizing space. And what ended up happening is, as we were talking about space, it just inevitably got into the what's going on in Syria and the build up to war. And it's a very eye-opening conversation about what's going on. Space is now used as a way to dominate in war situations. And Bruce enlightens us on to what's going on. Now, everybody will have maybe their different opinion politically on things, but it's important for us to be educated and to know what's really going on in the world and militarily. And then from there, you can make up your own mind on how we should be proceeding with these things. But this is a very interesting conversation, and I hope you get a lot out of this interview that I have. Bruce has been an organizer for over 30 years, and he's a peace organizer. He has produced multiple documentaries, and he's appeared on 60 Minutes and in many publications around the world. He currently hosts his own TV show called The Issue, and it appears in Maine. And he has a weekly radio show that also airs in Maine. And we are going to welcome him right now to the program. Hi, Bruce. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I know you're an expert at space issues and the military, and I'm going to dive right into this. What is the Outer Space Treaty?
It's a United Nations treaty, 1967, that said no country can put weapons of mass destruction in space. but more importantly, it said that all of the celestial bodies are the province of all humankind, and no country, no corporation, nor any individual can claim ownership of them. And it was really a very far-sighted treaty because it anticipated that in the coming years, as the space age matured, that there would be desires to go out and essentially mine the sky. And they knew that, like when the Spanish and the Italians and the British all had their navies and they were competing for control of new parts of the world, right? Columbus is going out and all these other explorers. And that led to the global war system that we still suffer from today, as all these, at that time, European sea powers were competing with each other and cutting each other's throats so they can control resources and markets in the new worlds. And so the Outer Space Treaty is really that kind of visionary treaty, saying, let's be careful as we move off the planet, as we inevitably will, and let's don't make those same mistakes again and take the war system with us into space. It's what I call the bad seed of greed and corruption and domination.
Well, we have quite a developed war system. So, which it would be, well, so how, I've read that you wrote an article on the fact that you think that this commercial space launch Competitiveness Act threatens that treaty. Why do you think that is such?
Well, one section of it states that U.S. citizens have rights to any resources that they extract from asteroids, moons, or other planetary bodies, including to possess, own, transport, use, and sell those resources. So this is really a shot across the bow of that United Nations treaty.
Well, doesn't it go, if it goes against that treaty, then could it be deemed not valid, or are we just ignoring the treaty?
No, the United States is ignoring it, undermining it, and in fact there's been a group of aerospace, a legal team, if you will, I've been tracking them for close to 20 years, who have been determined to essentially kill the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Treaty that essentially says the same thing. There can be no military bases on the moon. Nobody can claim ownership of it. It belongs to everyone.
Well, do we have a military base on the moon, do you think?
I don't think so, but the Army back in the 50s was beginning to make plans to do such a thing, and then in the United States Congress, they commissioned a congressional study that was published in 1989 called America's Military Space Forces, the Next 50 Years. The forward was signed by then Senator John Glenn, former astronaut, John Kasich, who's running for president today, then was a congressman from Ohio, Bill Nelson, who was then a congressman, now senator from Florida. He once went up on the space shuttle. And in this study, this congressional study, they talk about having bases on the moon, and they talk about having armed space stations controlling the Earth-Moon gravity well. If you think of a wishing well, whoever's standing at the top of the well, if somebody's trying to get out of the well, you kind of control their access. It's the same way with the Earth-Moon gravity well. Whoever controls what they call the L4 and L5 positions, as well as the moon, controls who has access on and off the planet Earth. And in this study, they say, again, this is a congressional staffer writing this, endorsed by many people in Congress. It says our armed forces might lie in wait at that location to hijack rival shipments upon return. So the inference here is that if anyone is not us, anyone is from another country possibly, or from a competitor corporation, that our U.S. military would take them out because we would be the masters of space, as they say at the U.S. Space Command and headquarters building in Colorado Springs, Colorado. On their doorway, they have their logo that reads Master of Space, and in a planning document called Vision for 2020, published in the late 90s, 1997, it said that the United States will control space and dominate space and deny access to space to other countries at various times.
So what was the initial intent of NASA? I mean, we kind of have to get into what all this and how it started and how we got to where we are now.
Well, NASA was, in its charter, it was created as a civilian agency. But from the very first days, we know that the early director of NASA was one of the former Nazi scientists that were building the V-1 and V-2 rockets for Hitler that he used to terrorize.
Von Braun?
Yeah, well, Von Braun, Kurt Debus, there were a whole bunch of them. But Kurt Debus, he became the first director of NASA. And so, anyway, from the very earliest days, there was a military oversight committee essentially appointed to control NASA. And so, from the beginning to the present moment, NASA's always been a stalking horse for the U.S. military development program for space warfare technology. And then now today, everything they do at NASA, once told by Sean O'Keefe, a former director of NASA, a couple directors back, he said everything we do now is dual use, both military and civilian at the same time. So every time they fly any mission at NASA, it also has a military role where they're doing some kind of top secret military weapons research and development testing.
Well, what do you see the role of NASA to be versus the military? Because I had Gwen Shotwell on, who was the president of SpaceX a couple weeks ago, and she pretty much said that NASA's the science arm and of space, and military is the military arm of space, and NASA's budget is significantly smaller than the military budget for space.
It's true that NASA's budget is significantly smaller, but again, one way the military augments its military space budget is by using NASA to do research and development projects for the Pentagon. So clearly, again, just listening to Sean O'Keefe, everything they do at NASA is dual use.
So basically, they figured out a way to increase their budget even more by saying, okay, this is all science-based. This is the stuff in the military that we're not too worried about having it be transparent, but we want you to work on this, and then everything else is military.
It's not transparent.
Nothing with NASA is transparent either?
No, I don't think NASA's transparent. They do a lot of top secret launches. They do a lot of top secret investigations. It's long been known that on the space shuttle, there's top secret components of the space shuttle that are used to do military experiments. So, yeah, I mean, NASA's not transparent at all. I remember some years ago they launched a mission to go up and map to test the technology to map the surface of the moon, and we learned later that they were using it to create high-resolution three-dimensional maps of the Earth. They were creating that technology and then use that technology when the U.S. launched shock and awe of Iraq in 2003. And the guys driving around in Humvees, breaking down doors in Baghdad, pulling people out of their homes in the middle of the night, they were hooked up to satellites that were using those three-dimensional maps that NASA had created, and that it was all top secret at the time. I'll never forget it.
Well, it makes sense if you have satellite technology that can see close up, and we have the computing power that we have now, that they would do it, right? I mean, they're going to do all that stuff. But what doesn't make sense to me is how they don't have it would seem like they'd already have a base on the moon. It would seem like there'd be a lot more going on in space than we know about.
Right now, the United States can't even get to the moon. NASA can't even get to the moon. They don't have the rocket launch technology to do it. In fact, the United States relies on Russia to get to the space station. In fact, the West has been demonizing Russia so badly in the last few years that Russia recently, about a year or so ago, I guess it was, announced that they were going to pull out of the space station in the next few years, and they suggested that the United States might want to get them